And NTPC Renewables, that too is in the spotlight. They are planning the launch of the green energy IPO. There's also a strong capex plan on renewables. We want to discuss that and so much more with Mohit Bhargav, the CEO at NTPC Renewables. Thanks much for taking time out, but I think I'll start first up with the IPO. What's the update here? Any timeline, any current status that you can share with us, sir?
Yeah, good morning and thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, the IPO is in the pipeline. We've started the preparatory work in terms of appointing the merchant bankers. So generally the timeline, I think most of you guys are generally aware that after the appointment of the merchant banker, the various processes and all of those will take anything from 8 to 9 months. So that's what we are looking at. Of course, we need to keep in mind that this would be subject to the right timing and how the market conditions are. So that's how it's right now.
Looking at diluting in terms of when you raid, what could be the band in which you would like to dilute?
We are looking at anything between 10 to 20%, but these are early days, so but that's a broad idea.
Are you looking at, NTPC, given that it's a government company, it's Navratna, they don't have problems in terms of raising debt. So are you going ahead with the energy renewable IPO purely to establish a benchmark?
No. It's not that. Given the pipeline we're talking about, we're looking at doing about 60 gigawatts by 2032. And in the next, maybe if you look at the next 2 years, we are looking at a capex of around anything of the order of about $3 to $4 billion. So we will need a lot of equity. And in terms of raising equity, there are limitations as far as government companies are concerned to infuse equity in the subsidiary. So we have to go to the market. But alongside benchmark, I don't know. But yes, it will give some idea of how the valuations are.
What is the projected turnover of the non-coal business of NTPC for FY24?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I missed the question.
The renewable energy for FY24, it's a subsidiary. What could be the projected turnover?
I don't have the figures offhand because we are still halfway through the Q4 of this financial year.
For 9 months, what did you do? So let's talk about 9 months, what you've done.
9 months, that was part of the NTPC's balance sheet. We did, if I remember correctly, we did about 1,000 crores top line.
When will this business reach what could be called as an inflection point? Because this is a new business, you're setting up the business, and when a new business is set up at scale, it's not the first 2 years, it's the next 3 years which really give it a J-curve. So do you think FY25, FY26 are going to be incremental growth years for this business?
Definitely. So look, if I could quickly work out the broad physical numbers which we're working on. As on date, we are working on a pipeline of over 25 gigawatts. And that includes about 3.5 gigawatts which are already operational. And then we already have about 8.5 gigawatts which is ordered and under construction. We have about 10 gigawatts which would be ordered in the next 6 to 8 months. And then, of course, there are more projects in the pipeline in the design stage. So the pipeline is robust, and all of these are capacities which have either long-term tie-ups, we have won the bids, or we have tied up with the C&I customers. So we have all things on the table. Now the challenge, if I may say, the main task in front of us is to execute these projects in time so that we achieve our targets.
And within this business, what's the split between solar and non-solar? How much is coming, let's say, from hydrogen and other pockets?
Right now, of course, it's skewed heavily in favor of solar, and we have only about 100 megawatts of wind capacity. But going forward, as we will be supplying a large amount of round-the-clock power to both industrial as well as distribution companies, that will require a lot of wind capacity. So I would assume that in the next 3 years, for example, we should have almost 40% coming from the wind side into the mix.
Right, and finally, given that the renewable space is certainly gaining traction, there has been a lot of focus as well on this from the government. What do you believe is your view on the overall renewable transition in the country? Are there any risks on the anvil?
Look, I think the government has been very, very clear in terms of how to approach the transition story. And so the target of having 500 gigawatt of non-fossil capacity by 2030 and the broad numbers of doing wind and solar by 2030. So the acceleration, the push is very clearly there. And that's why we feel that the growth of renewables is, of course, without doubt going to uh, happen. They also put in place the 50 gigawatt bid trajectory, which is also happening. So we are very clear that renewables will happen. Having said that, there are always challenges in a business. Otherwise, guys like us wouldn't be having any job. So.
All right. Thank you for joining